Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I am live, or at the very least, let me make sure the sound is okay. I always check the sound. Hope everyone is doing okay this Sunday. I wasn't going to do, always check your sound. Always check your sound. I wasn't going to do a show today, but I was privy to something that I said I must share my audience because this is awesome to talk about. I think it was a few years ago. I looked at the world for whatever reason in that one rare glimmering moment where you actually look at the world and you say, this doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Why on earth are there people on the streets? How on earth are there people on the streets? And yet you have all of the shit that nobody buys, all of the shit that nobody needs. Why is the world constructed in this way? And I realize that maybe the world doesn't make sense, but maybe it makes sense to somebody. And maybe because it makes sense to somebody, perhaps that difference between it making sense to them and it not making sense to me is an area where I need to interrogate. Because maybe within that area is this thing of, this is why the world is structured the way it is. I describe that process as to some degree waking up. This thing of looking at the world saying this world doesn't make sense. And maybe it doesn't make sense because it's organized in a way that is not going to make sense if you're looking at it from below as opposed to looking at it from on top. And looking at it from other people's perspectives other than the people who are for the most part at the bottom. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And maybe it doesn't make sense for a reason. And I call that process waking up. I'm going to use the term because I think people understand what's meant by it, whereas it's hard to fully explain what it means. It's this looking at the world and realizing that this world shouldn't be arranged in a way that it's arranged, and that there are people there who have vested interests in keeping it arranged in the way that it's currently arranged against the interests of the majority of the population that suffers under it. This process may not necessarily be fully understood by each of the people who are in it, even though the feeling itself, not necessarily being able to be explained, is understood, which is why I just used the term, because not everyone necessarily fully gets, ingrained. That being said, you have a lot of people who started to look at the political class and started thinking in the sense of class, even if they don't necessarily experience it in the sense of this kind of quote-unquote waking up. They understand that there's something wrong with their political system and their political apparatus, and they're beginning to point to it. When they did a poll, the younger generation preferred a new party. I think it was like 69%. Even now, with Trump in office, enthusiasm for the Democratic Party is waning among young voters, so-called millennials, as its candidates head into the crucial midterm. Democrats are expecting a blue wave. They were up at 12 points at one point. That has narrowed to 6, 7, about 7. Donald Trump is in office. Why are you struggling? Why are you struggling? Among the younger generation, Sanders destroyed. They want something fundamentally different, and they're not seeing it in the political class itself. I was privy to a conversation today that gave me hope. My first time I talked to my wife's dad, where we had a conversation about politics, he kind of made this point that he's sticking with Hillary and that he's voting for Democrat because Republicans are maniacs. And I agreed with him that Republicans are maniacs, that Democrats were not his saviors. And he was staunch on that. Wasn't budging from it. Unapologetic about it. My wife has a conversation with him today. And I hear her he tells her, I'm done with the Democratic Party. I'm done. I can't tolerate him anymore. My wife nearly fell off her chair. And she's like, Jamal is probably going to be happy to hear that. Now, he jumped the shark later on by saying that, but he wouldn't vote for Bernie Sanders. Not because he doesn't like Bernie Sanders' policies, but Bernie Sanders is too old. This is essentially a geriatric being a racist against other geriatrics. And hilariously, actually, but nevertheless, if it was somebody who was younger who was supporting those ideals, making the point that the greatest generation, and I hate that fucking term, they're not the greatest generation. I think Dan Rather coined that term. Was it Dan Rather? Well, essentially this idea of writing a book about the World War, missing the point that they got us into the World War. If they were so great, why did they get us into a war in the first place? 50 million people lost their lives. Greatest generation, my ass. But nevertheless, essentially that generation that was the most staunchest of Hillary supporters, especially in the African American community, coming around. That is a damning assessment. And that is a man who's been a Democrat for 60 years or more. Never thought about voting anybody else. Republicans are racists and maniacs, is what he would say. And yet, sick of the model that exists, where you have nowhere else to go. Ergo, you vote for me regardless of what I do. He's sick of it. He says, I'm done. If they're beginning to lose that generation, the most ardent of Hillary supporters, the most ardent supporters of the Democratic Party, the ones who watched Rachel Maddow, who watched Chris Matthews, who sit up watching MSNBC, the 60-something demographic who are, in their 60s and 70s and all this other stuff. If they are beginning to experience that process of, this doesn't make sense. These people are lying to me, the political and the media class. And there's something more that we could be doing in the way we've organized ourselves. This world doesn't make sense. If that's what's taking place, then that is a good thing. And I welcome him aboard. Solidarity of no. I'm going to see who's here. I don't think anybody's probably here for a video this quick. But, oh wow, there are people here. Okay. Democrats vote for everything that they're paid to. Brom SO1. And that's kind of the problem with Brom. And that was kind of his point. His main thing was they don't represent my interests. And what I mean by the world doesn't make sense. If Democrats were what they say they were, they would function in a different way. That's what I mean when I say the world doesn't make sense. These guys are saying they're pushing for X, and yet they don't represent X. Am I crazy? Is the world fucking insane? Or the world makes all the sense in the world, providing you're looking at it from a particular perspective, as in, these people are hacks. They vote for what they're paid to vote for. And at that point, the world makes all the sense in the world. Oh! I've woken up. I get it. When people get that point, this kind of class consciousness thing, where they're aware that there is a difference in the classes from the standpoint of, they're shocked that $100 millionaire Nancy Pelosi is not representing the interests of the workers and the poor. Why are you shocked? She's in a different class. Her reality, the things that she cares about, things that she faces on a daily basis are fundamentally different than what you face. Why wouldn't you want someone who's representing your specific class interests? And why are you shocked when they don't? That's a straightforward point. If you get $1 billion to run in a race, who are you getting the $1 billion from? And who are you representing if you need to get that money again? Just saying. Balthazar, Peter Dow goes, Hillary Clinton 2020 is a jury hat trick. A jury hat trick. That's fucking hilarious. The corporate Democrats are sophistic. I like that word, sophistic. Sidney A. Matthews, the world is insane. The 1% would kill us in order to make a buck. That's insanity, in my honest opinion. It is, but what's more insane is that the 99% go along with it, which is my point about class consciousness. That's kind of my point. Why are you going and fighting some rich man's war? Why? You didn't start that war. And you're acting like our shores are under assault. I mean, even beyond that point, there's a bunch of people who are protesting, supporting the rate hike for Amazon. literally fighting on behalf of plutocrats to stop attacks in Seattle. There's a certain amount that I'm getting at class consciousness. This understanding of they're in a different class. Their concerns, their priorities, the things that they care about are different than yours. But of course they're going to be different than yours. The problem is that they've co-opted both parties. And whereas instead of being nakedly class conscious, they push the word away. They pretend as if the word doesn't exist, like it's a monster in the closet that you can never utter its name, and they go about their affairs. What the public misses here, however, is that the reason they do that is because they don't want to have the conversation. It's pushing it away because both are co-opted by the same class. And you can imagine that if you're co-opted by that class, you don't necessarily want to bring up the term. Think about Klobuchar saying, "How dare you use the term billionaire?" He was enraged that they would ever utter the term billionaire. Why? Billionaire. Why are you concerned that people are saying billionaire? People need to say the word more often. Let me tell it. Yeah, they don't represent those interests because they're not paid to represent those interests. And you can't be shocked that they're not. How much money does it take to get elected? And you believe that they were going to get that money if they were working in the interests of the people who were giving them that money? Come on, just saying. Democrats tried to subvert the election process, and reforming them from them within is impossible. And that's the other part. When the public said, "We don't like this," they didn't deal with this from the standpoint of let the public get their say, which is kind of the point of politics. They dealt with it from, we need to stop the public from changing what we are. Those are different. That's fundamentally different. The DNC is like the bizarre version of the universe. It's knowable, not understandable, and under no obligation to make sense to you. Hashtag donor approved. Hashtag donor approved. My point is, it does make sense. It only doesn't make sense if you believe the narrative the media is putting out and you believe the narrative that Democrats are putting out. These are righteous gentlemen fighting for things and principles that they believe in and all this other stuff. Nonsense. Ultimately, business is the thing that they care about. If you're not clear on that, Obama running against the banks while at the same token having those exact same banks point the people who are in his administration. They're not representing you. That's my point. It only makes sense when you come to the conclusion that they're not representing your interests. Stop being lemmings. Alright, I'm going to end this. I'm not going to keep this one long, but Jerry Hattrick is fucking hilarious, by the way. Good one, Balthazar. Alright, I'm gonna end it here. If you guys enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, guys. Jerry Hattrick. He's not that old.